the Muller report be released while you're abroad next week?
That'll be totally up to the new Attorney General. He's a tremendous man, a tremendous person who really respects this country and respects the Justice Department. So that'll be totally up to him, the new Attorney General.
Mr. President, what do you expect from Austria?
That, I guess, from what I understand, that will be totally up to the Attorney General.
New reports that the Mueller probe is wrapping up, and President Trump says it's now up to William Barr to decide if or when the report is released. To former DOJ prosecutor John Wu. John, this was sort of anticipated, but now a lot of moves, including Michael Cohen's going to reporting to jail being pushed back. A lot of pieces it looks like everyone's bracing that this could possibly be true. What do you anticipate? Because it feels kind of eerie down in Washington, D.C., that maybe this won't be what Democrats had hoped it would be.
Well, first, if the Mueller report is finally finishing up, if the investigation is closing down, this is not just good for President Trump. This is good for the country. It's good that we finish the investigation and that the Attorney General can now decide what to release to the public. I hope that he releases a lot. I think it's in President Trump's interest because so far we haven't really seen a lot of facts that would suggest President Trump in any way committed a crime or conspired with the Russians. And so it's in President Trump's interest to have this get out in public, to reassure the public that their president didn't do anything wrong. And then if Democrats in Congress want to make a big hash of it, then let them go ahead and try.
John, should we see the entire report, anything that doesn't, that crosses the line with respect to national security, should the public see the entire report so that they can finally read and judge for themselves whether, this last 2 years was worth it and whether or not we should continue to pursue this?
A great question, Charles. One, first of all, we should realize that the DOJ regulations that led to the appointment of Bob Mueller as special counsel don't call for the public release of his report. He sends his report to Mr. Barr. The Attorney General decides then what to release or not. The Attorney General actually writes the formal report to Congress. And so the Attorney General could attach Mueller's report to it, make the whole thing public. You'll have to scrub it to make sure there's no classified information or grand jury information. But I agree with you, Charles. Most of what the public is going to be concerned about, I think, could be released. And we can all consider whether the last 2 years have been a big waste of time or whether we've got a good set of facts out. And then people in Congress can decide if they want to try to impeach the president. President Trump can declare his innocence, but let's get the criminal justice system out of it.
No, John, we got from Jake Gibson a note here that says, I'm being led to believe that some in Congress will be disappointed with what they get from Barr and that we should expect another oversight battle between Congress and the DOJ. I think we've got these oversight fatigue. I think we've got investigation fatigue. I think the American public probably would this time maybe be resentful if the Democrats indeed, like Adam Schiff says, are going to completely ignore the results of this and continue this on.
I agree, Charles. I think that if Mueller is the gold standard here for prosecutors, he's got a report, he's going to issue it. What are people in Congress and the House Democratic majority going to add to whatever Bob Mueller comes up with other than to just run out the clock on President Trump's presidency and just try to generate more scandal? So that's why I think it's actually in Trump's interest and the nation's interest that the Attorney General decide to release the report in public.
John, if it turns out that this is essentially a dry hole with respect to any proof that President Trump and those immediately around him, colluded with Russia, the collusion part, we haven't even seen any real indictments or convictions with respect to Russian collusion, maybe some other things like the Michael Cohen situation. Does that do any harm to even future ideas of these sort of special prosecutors? Because it wouldn't be the first time one went off the rails. It wouldn't be the first time millions and millions of dollars were spent, and people felt that it was more politically motivated than anything else.
It's another excellent point you make, Charles, that our experience with special counsels, whether it's Starr and Whitewater or now Mueller with the Trump investigation, if we're not finding any great scandals, if we're not finding President Trump violate the law, why are we trying to offload what is really Congress's job? If it wants to have impeachment hearings, they can have impeachment hearings, but why are we offloading this and trying to criminalize what really is a policy dispute between the president and Congress? So I hope maybe this might lead us as a nation to reconsider whether vesting all this power in someone like a Bob Mueller, no matter what great a guy he is not the right way we should be running the separation of powers in our government.
There's no doubt. Real quick, we've only got 30 seconds, but I do want your thoughts on whether or not it should be released next week, if it's ready, while President Trump is away.
That's a good point. Traditionally, we try not to undermine our presidents when they're abroad, particularly in sensitive matters like North Korea.
All right, John, thank you very much. Really, really appreciate it.
Let's not forget about Clapper, Comey, and Brennan, the three stooges, the three crooks who led the Justice Department, who led the National Security Intelligence apparatus, and conspired to overthrow President Trump. All three lied under oath. Comey was fired. President Trump revoked each of their security clearances, and people were wondering, why can't this president like these three gentlemen early on? You remember those days? Joining us tonight, Andrew McCarthy. Andy is the former chief assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, worked in the office for 18 years, now a National Review contributing editor, Fox Business contributor, and always a great American. Andy, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you.
Anticlimactic, says Clapper. Those three bums who ran the intelligence apparatus under President Obama, for him to make such a suggestion with all that he's insinuated, said directly and specifically against this president and his administration, I have to tell you, my blood boils when I think about it.
Well, I think, Lou, that this has always been fundamentally an impeachment investigation.
Oh, no doubt.
And, you know, well, so they have to get done and get the report to the House. It's obvious that it's been winding down. I think I read something this afternoon that Mueller's very large staff is down to 12 lawyers, and some of them are contacting their old employers about going back to work. So this thing has been downsizing and kind of down to the short strokes for a while now.
Yeah, I personally think, I know that that's your theory. My theory is that it was in place of an impeachment, which they couldn't possibly carry out. And controlling the House doesn't mean much when you basically have Adam Schiff as the chief provocateur. He's an impotent and ineffective congressman. God knows he wouldn't be able to lead such an effort successfully. I frankly think that they are fools who now realize their hour is over and the remainder of the days, and I'm talking about 6 years of days, remain with this president. What do you think?
Well, I think we have to be clear on what we're talking about with respect to impeachment. I still think the president will be, I think there's probably 3 chances out of 4 that he will be impeached, in the sense that the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives will file articles of impeachment.
Oh,
I don't think he'll ever be
wait a minute. Now,
removed.
if you're talking about impeachment from, from Green, from Schiff, the usual suspects, Nadler, right. I mean, these are left-wing bozos, for crying out loud. One couldn't control them no matter what the facts. The facts are that there is nothing to bring impeachment proceedings for, other than the offended hearts of these left-wing radicals.
Yeah, I just wanted to be clear that I wasn't suggesting I thought the president was going to be removed, but I think that there's a high likelihood.
Clarity these days.
Well, but I just think that Mueller needs to get the report done, because if there's going to be an impeachment in the House, he's got to get it to them.
Yeah, well, there's nothing that says that he has to get it to them, only that he has to get it to the Attorney General, as you well know. The Attorney General certainly would not, I would hope, would not be eager to share that report with a bunch of, as I said earlier, left-wing bozos. Who think that these minutes that they hold are going to turn into hours and days. I don't believe so. Let's turn to Clapper on CNN saying it's going to be anticlimactic. This is one of the folks in the intelligence community, along with Brennan, along with Comey, then following on now with the DNI, Dan Coates, and the others. I mean, what is going on with this intelligence community that they have the effrontery to talk as they do to this president in this disrespectful manner and publicly contradict the president's policy choices?
Well, you know, look, I think, Lou, that when these guys were running, particularly Clapper and Brennan, when they were running the intelligence community.
Yeah.
The intelligence community famously had politicized intelligence product. They're now out of the intelligence community, and they sound more like partisan operatives than former intelligence guys. And they're clearly politically opposed to the president. So I think they're now doing from the outside what they were, largely doing from the inside before this.
And it would be nice if the national left-wing media had the integrity to acknowledge that the president was right about those three gentlemen, and has been vindicated by the partisanship they've demonstrated and tried to wield against him as president. I want to turn to the idea that this president, no matter what, has been innocent throughout. But now he has a known corrupt leadership at the Department of Justice, at the FBI. And I don't know if that can be, those agencies, that department can be, well, can it ever have its integrity restored and the public's trust restored, because it's taken a severe beating over the course of these attacks over 3 years against this president.
Yeah, well, you and I have talked about this before, Lou, and I'm not as pessimistic about that as you are. I think what has to happen is there has to be accountability. There's got to be a credible investigation, soup to nuts, of what went on here. And I think Attorney General Barr is committed to making sure that that happens. So I expect that they'll take a long look at this, and if
we don't need a long look. We've had enough long looks, Andy. I got to interrupt you. I'm tired of the Justice Department and the FBI. It's a place where truth goes to die, where if you want to hide the truth, you start an FBI investigation. You don't hear about Benghazi. You don't hear what's happened to all of these people who we know committed crimes, who were guilty of outright political corruption.
Lou, at any moment, the president could unseal all this stuff and put it out publicly.
Well,
he's chosen not to do that.
That time, in my judgment, Andy, has arrived. It's arrived some time ago, as a matter of fact. But the idea of another lengthy investigation.
Lou, I hear he takes your calls.
Well, I don't know that he does take my calls, that often. What would you say would be a regular kind of occurrence?
I'd say even if you could do it once, put a bug in his ear. We need some disclosure.
You know what? I will give it my very best effort to get through that White House switchboard. I'm going to try just for you, Andy McCarthy, and the nation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Lou.
Great to see you.